Hello, UCG. How are you? I am Bramley, one of the ministers here, and delighted to be with you for a few minutes now. I am still getting used to this YouTube live thing, and I'm grateful that you've checked in and that you'll be bearing with me for the next few moments. When we said we were going to do this Lenten series, Elemental, I was still living in Illinois, and we were Andy, Talia, and I were planning to the worship for the next number of months. That is the practice here, to schedule things and start dreaming more in specifics as we got closer. We thought about Elemental then, and we assigned the preaching weeks, and that was as far as we got back in September. We revisit these things as we get closer to each day. And now when we were planning, we thought, okay, it's time to fill in these weeks. And so the first four elements came pretty quickly: air, water, fire, and earth. What is the fifth element, though? We thought about the fifth spirit. A number of us have small children at home, and so had seen Frozen 2, some of us multiple times. And so we thought, okay, well, maybe we'll do something about Elsa, the fifth spirit. But didn't quite settle on that, though you may see some elements of Elsa in Sunday's worship in the children's time. We thought too of heart. I don't know if you know this about Talia, but she was real big on Captain Planet as a kid. And apparently the fifth member of the Captain Planet squad was heart, the fifth element in saving the world. Sandy wrote an extremely interesting piece in Sunday's Lenten Devotional, and I invite you to make sure that you check it out. And if you haven't yet picked up a bag of Lenten supplies, it is not too late to do so. But she describes ether, which is not the chemical that you could knock out folks with in the early anesthesia that you always see folks getting swabbed with in medical movies with medical scenes from the 19th century, but rather was the classical and medieval element that was believed to exist sort of outside the Earth's atmosphere. It was what was there in the universe beyond here, and it was the medium through which light could travel. Now, of course, we know now some things about space that they did not know back in those days. And so ether, or quintessence, as they also called it, does not exist in quite that way. But there are still things through which light travels. There are still medium through which energy moves. Our children's message will talk about conductivity in ways that we hope children and the not scientifically inclined like me can understand. But so we're exploring medium and media and the ways that things travel and are connected. That really struck me. As some of you may know, I grew up in and was ordained in the Methodist tradition, and one of the things that John Wesley talks about, the founder of the Methodist movement, talks about quite a bit, is the means of grace. Now, Wesley was not one of the great, brilliant theologians that you hear of all the time. He doesn't get studied in the same way that Martin Luther or John Calvin do. But so to some extent, the things that he talked about and teased out are often elaborations on categories that already existed in theological and religious conversation. So the means of grace in other traditions are often primarily sacraments, ways by which we experience God's grace in baptism or in communion. In the Catholic Church, there are a number of other sacraments. so those are ways in which we experience God's grace in a particular way. And but Wesley sort of understood that term differently, means and medium. And he talked about different kinds of grace. And then he talked about different practices that could be ways that we could experience God's love and grace. And he has sort of a more expansive list. They're not sacraments. He was an Anglican, and so he had two sacraments primarily. Again, not weddings, baptism and Holy Communion. But he spoke of other things as ways of experiencing God's grace as well. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, thinking about what are the ways in which we experience love, in which we experience grace, in which we feel the light of divine love in our lives. This in particular because I had to go to a new doctor. Now, I found my doctor in Illinois, my most recent one, when we joined an HMO when I started, not my job at Hinsdale, but when I worked at the University of Chicago. And it was sort of interesting, I just picked somebody on the list who was a woman who was, whose office was close to our house. And when I got there, the first time I went to see her, I learned that her office, she was listed as an internist, which she was, but she also specialized in gerontology. So I was the youngest patient at the gerontologist for a number of years. And she was great in some ways. But in other ways, it wasn't a great time. And I never made the effort to find a doctor who was better suited. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had occasion to meet with someone new here, a doctor, and it was an astounding experience. I didn't really want to go. It was, I had a meeting I had forgotten about, and I had to move, and who has time to take care of themselves, right? So anyway, I went, and it was a marvelous experience because the doctor was so wonderful. She both listened and explained and made me she made me feel good. She affirmed my experience and my questions, and it was wonderful. And I just felt like I am experiencing something sacred here. And it was great. So I am wondering this week for you, what are the means of grace in your lives? How have you experienced love, respect, understanding, support, empowerment? How have you experienced that this week? As you go this day, feel and receive these words of blessing. Friends, may you be heard. May you be loved. May you be understood. And may you share that understanding, that hearing, that knowing and loving in return. Go in peace to be means of God's grace in the world. Amen. And we'll see you soon.